I'm Paula Nadelstern, and I'm from the Bronx, New York City, and this quilt is called Kaleidoscopic 35 Service for 8. It was made in 2012, and the dimensions are 49 by 82. In 2010, I had a solo exhibition at the American Folk Art Museum in New York City. Imagine how thrilled I was when the director of public relations told me that CBS Sunday Morning was interested in covering the exhibition. They wanted to come to my small apartment in the Bronx, and nobody ever wants to come to the Bronx. I'm not in Brooklyn, I'm in the Bronx, and film me in my studio, but only if I was working on a quilt. Of course I am, I said, although of course I wasn't, since I handed everything over to the museum minutes before I left to teach in New Zealand, returning a couple of days before the exhibit opened. I prepared for the shoot by beginning a single kaleidoscope. I decided to limit my palette and use only fabrics from my most recent collection of fabrics called Nuance. I designed the fabrics for Benartex. I'd never made a quilt completely from my own fabrics before. In fact, I was never interested in doing that. I always enjoyed finding the relationship between my stuff and almost every other fabric in the world, which is why I need a huge stash. Sometimes I make scopes that seem lacy or seem to have spokes extending from the hub, but not this time. This one was clearly going to end up looking like a densely packed circle, looking like a colorful plate. By the time the camera crew journeyed to the Bronx, I was on plate 3, creating an homage to my extensive collection of Deruta Italian dinnerware gathered one by one over many years. It still surprises and delights me that I own these plates. I am moved by work that offers a glimpse into the choices made by the hand of the artist. Alas, in my small apartment, I will never have room to set a table for 8 and lay everything out at once. But each hand-picked, hand-painted plate, mug, serving platter has a different pattern with similar colors, and I was inspired by that and mixed up the prints from the Nuance collection so that each of my plates has a different pattern. Just like the plates, I circled each of my piece plates with the yellow and cobalt ring, which is the only fabrics not in my own design. The quilt called Kaleidoscopic 35 Service for 8 took over 2 years to make. A few months after the exhibit ended, I was diagnosed with a type of lymphoma. It was an atypical time in my life, and I had to cancel teaching trips for the first time in my career. My fabrics, my templates, my patches waited in my studio. A friend who was not a quilter told me not to work on the quilt because I would always connect the making of this quilt with this difficult time in my life. In fact, it was the opposite. To its maker, every quilt becomes a soft document chronicling the events that took place during its evolution. We don't expect nothing to happen, while we're making our quilts. And whenever I managed to get into my studio for that period, I wasn't a patient. I was me, the art quilter who makes kaleidoscopic quilts, had a solo exhibition a few months before, and is lucky enough to be recognized for doing what she loves to do. The quilt was hand quilted and bound 18 months after I started it, but within a week of completion I realized it needed more, and spent another 6 months hand appliquing an elaborate border of entwined circles cut from one piece of black ultra squid. Very Semper Tedium. I think I've made this quilt look simpler than it is. In a photograph, it looks like I've appliqued circles to one big piece of fabric, when in fact, each circle has more than 200 patches and are pieces of the background. I tend to camouflage seams to encourage an uninterrupted flow from one patch to the next, rather than create contrast at the seams so the final effect seems seamless. The audience has to come up close to hundreds of seams and stitches. And I am, proud to tell you that this quilt did not get into Houston this year. I was surprised, but I realized that once again it is because it is, it just looks like these big circles. I do have a piece in Houston, but I'm glad to show you this one because I love it so much.